Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, we welcome back Chris Craig. You might know Chris from his following on social media or for his work with RockEd. In our prior episode, we dove into his background and really learned a lot about him and kind of his extremely interesting background. Today, we're going to learn about what he's currently up to, including a white paper he recently wrote about technician training needs and a book. You're an author now, Chris?
Yeah, soon to be. I mean, it's not official because we haven't actually published it yet, but everything is in order. I got an ISBN number, so I guess it is technically official. It's just not available yet. But yeah, it's a completed product, and I'm very, very excited for it to launch. I'm very excited for people to get it in their hands. I got a wait list going on right now. People are starting to sign up for that, so that's exciting. There's interest. Very excited. Very, very excited for that to launch.
And what is the name of the book? And I don't know if you have your final title yet, but I am interested to hear what you have to say there.
Oh, we got final cover art and everything right now. So it becoming a better service professional. And that title kind of came about. I think I was like almost halfway through writing the book, and it just kind of came across me that what I'm trying to do here is just help people simply become better and improve themselves incrementally. So I take it's kind of like a journey, if you will, throughout the series of the book. All 12 chapters. It's 12 chapters long. And the first chapter is what is a service advisor, and it's for more than just service advisors. Like technicians are going to find value here, service managers, even porters, anybody that works in automotive industry, particularly in the service department, is going to find value in this. And it's for dealerships, independent shops, and everybody. But the reason why I wanted to focus on the service advisor first is it's kind of like the central, it's like the hub of the whole process, right? All the information flows through the advisor. So if we can better understand that position, we can better understand the process as a whole. And I think that helps particularly technicians with agency, so they can understand what part they play. They're part of something bigger than themselves, and it helps them feel, because they don't get outside the shop too often and see all the different things there's to see, particularly in like a dealership or a larger service department. So helps them with agency so they can understand the whole process. But I go from there and talk about the three different systems that are existing in service facilities: the shop production system, customer service system, business operations system, how they kind of coincide with each other and where the transfer points are. The 4 stages of the repair order process, the 4 opportunities that you can sell to a customer in the service department. And then I talk about understanding pay plans, how to do the math. Like I get a lot of emails like, hey, I got this pay plan. Like, is it good? Is it bad? I explain the exact math that you can do to understand what your commission check could be from an expectation standpoint before taking that next job. Because one time I did take a job at another dealership and my pay decreased very, very rapidly. And I thought I was making the right choice. And it just turns out the pay plan wasn't what I thought it was because I didn't do the math correctly. So I talk about those sort of things. And I also wrap it up with a chapter about mindset, proper balance mindset, negative, positive, how to stay on that course and that path. And then the final chapter is leadership, because I really think that everybody is a leader, if nothing else by example. When you join a service team, there is a leader in place, that manager that hired you, but who do you see the most often is the people around you. And they are the custodians of the culture of that shop or that service department. So they lead by example. And I think that everybody should be training in their leadership characteristics. One, for that. And two, because one day when they do get called upon to be the actual leader with the role, with the title, with the office, they're going to be prepared for that because they've been training leadership for their entire career. The time to train leadership is not when you get the promotion. You should be doing that long before. So that's why I wrapped the book up with a chapter on leadership.
I think that is a well-timed chapter because I think that's a real core issue to our industry right now, right? And you talk to a lot of technicians and just a lot of dealership personnel in general each and every day. There's a lot of complaints about communication. There's a lot of complaints about leadership. There is a lot of just tension around that, and I think a lot of it comes because maybe there wasn't that training up front. Maybe there wasn't that ability to really prepare somebody up front, and I do think that's really done some damage to our industry as a whole. Just because I get this quote from somebody else: promote to a position of ineptitude, right? Like where you're promoting somebody until they maybe can't do the job anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I lost you a little bit there, Jay. I don't know if it was my internet was unstable or something, but I got the tail end of that. So
You're
um
good.
yeah, no worries. But no, it's all good points for sure. Leadership, you really need to be training it throughout. And it's a characteristics of leadership, right? It's integrity, it's it's your honor, it's your accountability to yourself. I mean, these are all characteristics that a leader takes on: selfless service, personal courage. Like, these are all things that are characteristics of a leader, but they're also simultaneously characteristics of just a good team member in general, right? That's what leadership is. It's taking care of the people to the left of you and the right of you. And you don't have to have a title to do that. You just have to have the character to do that. Your attitude has to be in place to do that. So if you are always constantly trying to be a leader, if nothing else by example, when you step into that role, you're going to be ready for that role. And that's, I really think that in a lot of cases, our industry craves leadership. As you know, I'm very active on social media, and the comment section is very, very crass about leadership issues that they're dealing with. And every time I read a comment from somebody like, Chris, this is what happens in my service department, can you believe this, XYZ, or a DM I get, 99.99.99% of the time, it is always something that a good leader could step in and fix. Because it's the question goes through my mind is, where's the leadership here? Like, what is happening? Why is somebody allowing this to be the particular standard? Why is that? Why are we letting our employees kind of fail in these different ways when we could step in and correct these things? So if you have a leadership that's in good standing of character and cares about people, because that's what leadership is all about people, things are really going to flourish. I always say it, there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. A good leader can turn any team around.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I do want to segue that into the white paper, and we're going to go to a little out of order here just because I think that leads really nicely into it. We talked about the book, but you also have done a really, really well thought out white paper doing research on technicians and specifically what a technician's training needs currently are. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you did with that white paper?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you ever just kind of like stumbled through something and came out the other side smelling like roses with a really cool white paper, but that's sort of what happened with me. We, as you probably know, with Rockhead, I create curriculum for service advisors primarily. I write scripts and they become learning curriculums, micro learning, 1 to 3 minutes a day, certified courses. We certify in tires and brakes and maintenance and EV now. And it's really powerful stuff. And we talk a lot about like soft skills, like communication and, how to explain certain things to customers and best practices and stuff like that, stuff that you can teach over a video format. And the question got brought up, can we replicate this for technicians? And I thought to myself, well, I used to be a technician and I know this content. Like, is there a use case here? And well, I don't know if it makes sense to teach them how to replace tires and oil and diagnose check engine lights, because for the most part, they've got that down pat. And there's plenty of training accessible for them to learn that part of the job. They don't need me telling them how to diagnose a check engine light. I don't think they want to hear that. So I asked myself, what about soft skills? Like, what about communication, proper documentation, all these different things that technicians actually do. They do them, but I don't remember ever being trained on them when I was a technician or I was in tech school. So I started asking myself a series of questions like, is this important? Like, are soft skills important for technicians? Can it help technicians with their job placement, with their retention? Could it impact technician shortage? I'm asking myself these big questions, and I'm very honest with myself as I really don't know. But there's power in numbers. So I said, why don't we do a survey? So I started the survey out with, what do I ask? Like, what are the response options going to be? So I interviewed 11 industry experts, ranging from my professor at the Pennsylvania College of Technology to fixed operations directors, a couple of shop foremen, some technician trainers. And I kind of like used the information I got back from them and I built my survey. And it was a select all that apply or scaling questions, a scale of 1 to 5, because you can very easily account that data. It's not open-ended, so it's not like left to my imagination. It's very pinpoint. It's like, okay, they selected X, Y, and Z, and this person selected A, B, and C. So it's very calculatable. And I put that survey out to my social media, and in 13 days, I had 804 people voluntarily respond to that survey, which was awesome. And I like to say voluntarily because I didn't offer gift cards, I didn't offer money or incentives. I just, hey, out of the kindness of your heart, I'm trying to figure something out here. Will you guys please fill this out? And all 804 people responded quickly, and they're all involved with the automotive industry in some way. As you can see with the first 2 questions in the white paper, it's all demographics, where they work, what they do. Over 75% were technicians, but we also have diversity in there with advisors and managers and some shop owners and some general managers even. So there's a diverse representation there. But yeah, it just went into outstanding data. I mean, it took forever to go through the data and really make sense of it, but it came out with some really interesting feedback regarding soft skills and technicians.
And and I had the opportunity to read through it, and I told you before we hopped on the recording that I was so impressed by what you came back with. I was really impressed with the angle that you took at it. I think it was different than a lot of surveying that happens within our industry. And being that it was focused on more of those soft skills and things that maybe we overlook as an industry, and things that I do think if we paid a little bit more attention to, we would put ourselves in a better position, because then you are intentionally focused on growing leaders and being able to identify who those people are that have that potential to be leaders. Was there anything out of the survey that, as you asked it, maybe you were surprised by, or maybe anything that stuck out in particular?
So at first, I was not surprised. I was sort of like, this makes sense. So the data overall, the most popular responses from the sample um, was basically suggesting that technicians either value or are deficient in skills in the attitudinal and behavior categories. There's three learning categories: behavior, attitude, and then technical knowledge, or just knowledge. Technical knowledge is the stuff that technicians know how to do. They know how to diagnose a vehicle. They know how to swap tires. They know how to change oil and do coolant services. They know how to do all that stuff. So the knowledge thing was like basically there. Nobody really said that we're deficient there, but we were deficient in our behavior and attitude categories. Behavior was in second place for priority, and that's your soft skills. That was your time management, proper documentation. That was change management, adapt to change, all that different kind of like soft skill stuff. That was in second place. Only to the attitude stuff, which was the willingness to learn, the willingness to ask questions, thoroughness, attendance, things that have to do more with your character. And I said to myself, well, yeah, I mean, we never really talk about that in tech school, at least in my experience. And I don't really think that managers are talking to technicians about those things. So we would be deficient in those things because we're not addressing them. And a lot of people say, well, you can't train a character. And the title of the paper is Training Needs. So how do you train a character? And this is where it was kind of like eye-opening to me. Well, you don't train good character. You can't teach someone how to have a good attitude, but you can inspire it through positive leadership. Here we go again. As a leader, I can lead by example and show you what good attendance looks like and show you what a good attitude looks like. And I can also inspire you to want to work and inspire you to want to learn, which these are all things that the 804 people that took the survey were saying that technicians are potentially deficient in and could have value in. So it was pointing to me a leadership deficiency. So I tabled that and I kind of doubled down on exploring this further. There was another question on there that had to do with the question was, rate on a scale of 1 to 5, rarely to always, how often entrant technicians are deficient in the following categories. And the categories were technical knowledge, industry knowledge, motivation, effective communication. The motivation and effective communication was an interesting data set because the neutral bar was the tallest, which means most people that took the survey had no opinion, which is bizarre because especially in automotive, people always have an opinion. So I was wondering to myself, like, why is it that people are essentially saying, I don't know how often my entrant technicians are deficient in motivation and effective communication? So I took the sample and I sorted it by leadership roles only. So if you had a leadership title, director, manager, foreman, owner, whatever it was, if there was a title that suggested you were a leader, I took your data and kind of ditched the rest and I reran the question. Well, the same general response pattern remained. The neutral bar was still the tallest. So our leaders are saying, I actually have no idea how often my new hire technicians are deficient in their ability to communicate effectively and be motivated. So that made me take a pause and step back and say, well, how would I know? If I'm taking this survey and I was answering this question, how would I know? Well, if I sit down with a technician and I talk to them and I ask them questions about their job, if their tone elevates and their pace elevates and they sort of get louder and excited and they talk a little bit faster, I could realize that when we talk about their job, they're motivated. But not only that, but I'm listening to the responses coming back from this individual. And it's very clear, cut and dry. I don't have a lot of questions. He's communicating rather well. And right there, I know that this person is motivated and can communicate effectively. But I only knew that because I was communicating with that technician, that new hire entrant technician. So the data may indicate that there's a lack of communication between leadership and entrant technicians, which is the most critical time for retention of a technician, especially when you consider the culture shock that you might experience going from tech school, doing cool things like diagnosing EVs, rebuilding transmissions, doing live work lab stuff, diagnosing engines and all kinds of things, and then you're changing oil for 12 months straight. So you take somebody that did these cool things in college, they got this great piece of paper, they're accomplished, they're at the top of the hierarchy, and you put them at the bottom of the barrel. And I understand there's knowledge and experience, but we have to communicate that, which might be deficient. And we have to get those technicians to want to stay and grow their career in this industry and not leave our industry And we have to do that through communication to them, which this survey data sort of indicated that might be lacking. So that was two particular data sets that pointed to leadership might be the answer here.
There is so much to unpack there of
Yeah.
what you just talked about. And I am so happy that you're bringing this to the forefront of the conversation, right? Because I think you are absolutely spot on. I totally agree with the data here in that there is a huge gap, especially for entry level technicians. And we hear it all the time through some of our WrenchWay studies about that lack of communication, that lack of mentorship, that lack of just general caring if you make it or not. Right. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the attrition numbers of young technicians leaving the industry, it's alarming. And from a shop's perspective, I don't know why you wouldn't take this a little bit more serious, right? Because if you're putting all this time, money, and effort into a young person to grow them into a good technician, and that's a whole different conversation because I think a lot of times our expectations as leaders in this industry of somebody fresh out of tech school coming in and being a big time producer right off the bat is really unrealistic. But then if you take a deeper dive into that and you look at the lack of intentionality with a young person within most shops across our nation, and you start to kind of see why we have that fall off and we don't have, I had my buddy Tanner Brandt tell me that he's a remote diagnostic tech and he goes out to all kinds of different shops and helps them diagnose vehicles. And he said, Jay, the interesting part to me when I walk out to a shop is you've got a bunch of techs, excuse me, that are closer to the end of their career and then a bunch of younger techs, but in the middle, there aren't a lot. And I think that is the core reason for that, right? We haven't done a good job bringing them along.
Yeah, and I was doing some initial research when I was starting the white paper, like what is this technician shortage? What are the numbers? And the Tech Force Foundation, I think it was 2023, they put out some really solid data in reference to that. And I think they said in the next 5 years at the time in 2023, we're going to be, I don't know, 750,000 short. And that's positions that we need to add to the automotive industry. And then you also have operational turnover and all these other things. But through my research, what I realized was the technician shortage is actually sort of improving. And we'd have to fact check me on the Tech Force Foundation article I posted a few times. I have it. But it looked like the technician shortage was actually improving in the more senior tenured technician arena, meaning we weren't losing those people as badly as we were. I want to say it improved from 1 million down to 750,000, somewhere in that ballpark. However, in the entrant technician area is where we're just losing people by the droves. So that's really the important piece. And I think that what you're experiencing there and the feedback that you got is it shows that is we have our older crowd and then we have our younger crowd and nothing in between because nobody's lasting long enough to get to that middle section, which means that, eventually there's going to be operational turnover and that tenured piece is going to go away. And there's not going to be a lot of people to fill that role. And that fundamentally is sort of problematic because there's the old fundamentals of apprentice and master, right? You have to have the master who's going to train the apprentice, who becomes the master to train the apprentice. Right now, I'm seeing a gap based on what you're saying and what I've seen. There's a gap between master and apprentice right now. And without an apprentice that's up and coming, there's not going to be a set of masters to train the next generation. And that is only going to add to the compounding issues that we see in the technician arena as far as automotive is concerned.
Yeah. And I think we've been in this perpetual chasing of our own tail, right? Where for, I'd say decades, we ignored that there was a shortage that was increasing. And maybe in a lot of cases, you hear all the comments on social media and you go anywhere on social media, that's technician focused. You're most likely going to hear some negative feedback about our industry. And I do think a lot of it is probably true, right? There are still bad shops out there that don't do a good job with leadership. And I do think what you said there was interesting about less turnover with our more veteran or experienced technicians. And I do think that we're moving the needle slightly, right? Because I think in order to fix the young problem, we've got to fix the older technician problem first, because if you just have your older techs telling those young people, like, what in the world are you doing here? And we've had multiple podcasts with young technicians where we'll ask them about what the message is from older techs. And a lot of times it is, you're awfully smart. Why are you in this industry? Like, get out.
I was told
And
that.
so, yeah, exactly. And so I think when you see that, but now you're starting to see, I think the shop starting to adapt to, really take care. If you're a good technician, there's a lot of shops that are doing a great job of taking care of those people now. And maybe, 10 years ago, I maybe couldn't have said that. Right. So I think we're moving in the right direction there, but the lack of intentionality with young people is alarming. And I mean, and this is any size shop. I've seen this in the biggest shops in the US, and I've seen it in the smallest mom and pop shops. And somehow, there's kind of two different angles at this. We've got to take care of our more experienced people that have put their blood, sweat, and tears into this industry and into our individual businesses over the course of the years. And then we also have to really get more intentional about that young person and making sure that we are bringing them along correctly, and making sure that the person that we need, that master, to be able to train the apprentice, that the master's not telling the apprentice to get out of the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add to that. I see a lot of blaming of generations. I'm a very young millennial. If I had been born, I think it's 3 or 4 years later, I'd be a Gen Z. So I'm right there, right? And oftentimes I'm on podcasts and maybe I just look old, but they're like, what do you think of that millennial Gen Z generation? I'm like, what do I think about myself? I don't know. That's sort of me. I think that we spend a lot of time in some cases just saying that the younger generation just doesn't want to work. They're too different. They're too this, always on their phones, all these different things. But I think that we really have to respect that they grew up in a very, very different world compared to like what some of us have. Now, I grew up without internet. It was probably, I was 10 years old when like Facebook started to become a thing, and then got my first cell phone at 16. It had a keyboard. That's how old it was. I got my first smartphone when I was 18 or 19. So I kind of grew up with it. But kids nowadays like have, well, depending on their parents, they have access to the world, right? And they sort of can see that thing. But when they're an adult and they're working in the industry, the old phrase, the grass is always greener, kind of comes into play, because now they have access. Like I can scroll TikTok, YouTube, or anywhere, and I can see what other technicians are up to. Like, what is their work life like? Like they might talk about their pay, for example. Like, oh, how do I get that? Oh, I have to move to this place and work there because that's where the economy and the money is. So they have this access and they can see everything at such a clear rate. And it gets them, I mean, comparison is the thief of joy. So they start to really think about like, what am I doing here? Why do I work here? And then you have the situation where they start to use other online services and they start to apply to other places in other states, for example. I was this person. I went from Pennsylvania to Tennessee doing this exact method. And all of a sudden they have an opportunity somewhere else. They've landed a job in a state that's 3 states away. Well, now I log in and I go to apartments or something like that, and I figure out where I'm going to live. And I do everything digitally. I load the truck up and I go. And then once I get there, I start to hop out to some other local places once I hear about what they're doing. And then eventually we label these people job hoppers and we blame them. Well, why are they leaving in the first place? So you're telling me that they're going from technician job to technician job, from advisor job to advisor job. They're doing the same job. The only difference is they're choosing to do it for someone else. So whose fault might that be? We circle back to leadership once again. What are we doing to retain these people? I know they're different. I know it's a different generation. I know they see the world entirely different than the old guard, if you will. And it's a technological jump too, because we have had so many changes in the last couple of decades. But we have to work on really connecting with these people and actually getting them to want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, give them agency, inspire them to be part of our service team, make it actually matter to them. Because right now they're just going from job to job. The only thing that's going to get them to stay is to inspire them to be part of this particular organization for these values and sets of reasons.
Things sure have changed since the old days of wrenching on vehicles in the driveway. Modern-day vehicles, hybrids, and EVs contain more than 10 million lines of code and require a keen understanding of technology to diagnose and repair. ASE certified technicians are in high demand, and the earnings of an ASE certified tech can be as much as 20% more than a non-certified technician. The launch pad to a high-tech career begins at ase.com/careers.
It is fascinating once you dive into the psychology of this, right? And the thinking behind exactly what you're talking about. And even with us on the WrenchWay side, we'll notice that there'll be shops that are very, very hesitant to post their salary information out. And my rebuttal to that is oftentimes those technicians know better than you do as far as what the competitive pay is, because they are used to using those digital assets to be able to go on and do their research. And it's not such a secret anymore, right? And I think that's where, from leadership in the industry as a whole, is maybe taking control of that narrative a little bit on. And granted, you're not going to ever control anybody in their personal opinions. You're always going to have negative people regardless of what industry you're in. But in our industry, I feel like the negative tone far outweighs the positive tone. And if I were a parent of a young person that was looking at the automotive or diesel or collision, whatever industry that we're in, and I saw that, hey, this, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the salary is not all that great. You have to invest a bunch of money into tools up front. I go online and all I see is all of this negative narrative. I always say, like, who in their right mind would send their kid into this industry, right? Like, if you just did basic research and surface level research on this, it would be hard for somebody to send, their prized possession, their little Johnny, into this industry, because if they've got options, that there's things that maybe aren't all that attractive at surface level with our industry.
Yeah, and from industry to industry transitions, especially for an automotive technician, is incredibly easy to do, because cars have everything that, let's say, a house has: electrical, wiring, all that kind of stuff is there. They have heating and HVAC, just like a car does. There's these very easy transitions that you can make. You can even go into like the heavy diesel world, which I get a ton of feedback on my social media channels that they went to the heavy diesel world and they will never come back to the automotive world. They just say it's much, much better. It's salaries and pensions, all these different things that go into it, but also the work is a little less dire because there's not customers on the other end to manage and things like that. So it doesn't feel as stressful or anything, which, sometimes you can help those situations, sometimes you can't. But the point is that, yes, you look and you see, and like, I have to make a big investment in the tools and I need training to do this, which might cost me if I go to technician school or something like that. The hours are long. The pay isn't as great as it could be. Everybody seems like they're upset that works in this industry. And I see on social media all the time, everybody talking about how they got out of the industry or they're planning to get out of the industry. Why in the world would I get into this? I already know all this stuff about a car, like, for example, heating and HVAC, because a lot of people tend to transition to that, at least from what I see on my social media channels. Why wouldn't I just take one section of this car and work on that for a living and have a very happy career over here? And I don't have to worry about the rest of that mess. So yeah, there is some work to do there to get people to actually want to fundamentally be part of the automotive industry, right? Because what's enticing people to want to be a young technician right now? It's certainly not any of the things that we listed. So it's a big thing to unravel. Leadership can play a role into that, but there is also, the tool cost, and we've discussed that in the past. I mean, the tool cost and everything is a hard pill to swallow. I do caution a little bit on the pay side, because a lot of people say, oh, if they would just pay me more, I wouldn't care. Like, I'd be good with it. I used to say the same thing to my wife when I was coming through the dealerships. I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is crazy. This happened, but if they paid me more, I wouldn't care. Well, eventually they did. Eventually I was actually having a 6-figure year, a little over a 6-figure year. And I left that dealership because I was having some very severe issues with leadership there. I actually read about that in the book, by the way. So, eventually see that. But the reasons why I left there particularly, and the money was outstanding, and I walked away from that. So that told me right there that, like, well, pay increases, well, yes, I think they're necessary. They're not the end all be all fix. So there's a lot of other things that we've already discussed that I think that we have to address. Pay is certainly one of them. Flat rate is something that people, for the most part, really don't like. So there's definitely things to address there, but I do get a little apprehensive when some people say, like, oh, if we would just pay them more, they'd stay. I don't know if that's the case, because I had really good money at one point and I walked away from it because I just wasn't happy. I was just not in a good place there. So, and I feel that might be the case for some technicians in some shops, because I know they're out there. So
yeah, it's almost like how much do they have to pay me so I'm willing to be unhappy all the time? And
right.
I don't think that's just our industry either. I think there's a lot of, I've got friends that are pharmacists that are miserable, right? And
yeah,
it's interesting because when you see the paycheck and you sign up for the paycheck, I think your mindset goes to, like, that's the one thing that's going to make me happy. And then when you go in and you're like, I don't like any of these people I work with, and really don't like leadership and what they're telling me to do. And at times, if it's unethical and it goes against your morals, then you have this internal conflict, and it then shifts to not being all about money. And you might actually, I've seen this before, where a tech will leave and take less money to go somewhere where they're going to be happy.
Exactly. And if we place money above all, saying that this is the end all be all solution, pay them more. If that all is all a technician or an employee or a team member anywhere values, that means they're not really wanting to be part of that team, that organization, that dealership, that shop, that independent store. They don't care about that leadership. They don't care about their coworkers. All they care about is the dollar sign on that paycheck and the amount that's on there. So if the shop next door says, hey, I'll pay you X amount more, if that's the only value set they have, they're going to be going to the other shop. So you're going to have this operational turnover anyways. Because then it's just going to be the highest bidder. And then you're going to see technicians just cycling through different places trying to get higher paychecks. And I don't think that that's the case. Just you just referenced, people have taken pay cuts to go to other places to be happier. So while pay is an issue like that, so I always draw back to like, hey guys, pump the brakes here. I think that there's other things we can address. That's why my white paper didn't really focus on pay as much, because I think we have a lot of really great data in there. And I do think that there's some progressive things we can do in the realm of pay. I really wanted to focus on training these, because in my experience, the more we train somebody, the more we empower them and give them authority to move and make decisions and give them some agency in the organization so they can feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And that is really the secret sauce in retention.
Yeah. And as I'm looking through the chart and a few of your different graphs, one of the things that I'm kind of circling back to what we started the conversation with was the leaders being willingness to work, willingness to learn, for just really what makes a technician successful in this industry. And very low on the list on each time was ASE certifications. And full transparency, we're partnered with ASE on the school side of what we do at WrenchWay. So I am a believer in ASE. The one thing I'll say from an employer's perspective, when I'm looking at a potential technician, I think a tech that gets those ASE certifications that's a beginning piece to telling me that they do have a willingness to learn, that they do have a willingness to get better, and that there is attitude there. So it's almost to me speaking to that, right? And I've heard that before about employers wanting somebody with a 4-year degree, in that it's not necessarily the piece of paper with the 4-year degree. It's the fact that they went through the pain to get the 4-year degree that shows them something, right? And so as I looked at that, that was one thing that really, really stuck out to me, was kind of the low value on ASEs. But from an employer's perspective, I see a lot of value in that. And I do think over time, our industry needs some level of credibility. We need some level of, the ability to separate the person that just hangs a shingle out on their garage and says, I'm a tech, I can do brakes on your car. And the people that have actually been trained and actually, know the stuff. Is it the only indicator to whether a technician is going to be successful or not? Absolutely not. I don't think ASE would say that either. But it's an indicator that there's more there, right? That maybe there's some depth and maybe there's some desire to become something more than they are.
Yeah, I think the phrasing of the questions would kind of set ASE up for potentially a little failure there. What makes a technician successful? Well, a certification is not what makes you successful. My 2 college degrees in the wall behind me is not what made me successful. It got me started, but that didn't get me anything that I have in the automotive industry today. And an ASE certification is also not going to do that. But just as you said, if I have 3 people that I'm choosing to hire, and one has a slew of ASE certifications and the other 2 just says, I work on cars. They have the same level of experience, but one took the extra step to do some testing and say, look, I have proven my aptitude. I studied, I applied myself, and I got these as a result. That tells me that that person, while they're probably not a master technician right now, and they probably don't know how to fix everything, it tells me that they're dedicated, that they want to follow through, and that they're willing to do things that are extracurricular, do the hard things, if you will. I can give you my own college experience. I always, every time I'm introducing myself, I always tell them my 2 degrees that I got from the Pennsylvania College of Technology is, and the reason I do that is because not because I have the degree. Lots of people have these degrees from this particular college. A lot of people have degrees from a lot of colleges. And it's not like showing like, oh, I'm a brainiac, I know all these things. It's showing that, look, I took the time to get myself through college. I also self-paid myself through college. So it took a lot of extra time, worked full-time jobs while I was doing it. And it just showed that I was willing to do the extra stuff to get myself an education, to give myself a little bit of a leg up on the competition, if you will, in the workspace. So I completely agree. I think the ASE certifications have value. I think the way that question was phrased is probably why people said not so much, because it's not what makes you successful, but it's certainly what gets you started, and it presents yourself to a future employer as a way that, like, hey, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to work, just as you said. I think it does connect to those things. So it certainly has its place. Rocket does certifications, so of course I'm on board with certifications 100%. As a matter of fact, my tech school, we got bonus points for accomplishing ASE certifications. So it was always encouraged, and I think it looks great on a resume, and it shows that you have aptitude and that you want to learn, you want to work. So I agree. I think certifications certainly have their place. I don't think they're what makes you successful, and that's what the data shows. But it shows that you have the capacity for success.
I love the way that you stated that, because I think it's so perfectly stated. And I think the more I read through the white paper, the more I kind of came to that understanding. Whereas at first when I read it, I was like, wait a minute, like I'm trying to make sense of this. And it did make sense after I read into it further. Now, the other thing, and as we're looking to try and get more of this, if you call it soft skills training or just some of the non-technical training with technicians, at the conclusion of the white paper, you talk about the common theme, and really it comes down to attitude, right? Willingness to learn, willingness to work, attitude, thoroughness, and attendance. You had talked earlier in the podcast about how that is trainable to anybody. Is there any truth to, like, sometimes you just got to get the right person in the door that is going to be trainable, or maybe you'll find that person that isn't overly coachable? And then can you overcome that by having kind of that strong alpha technician in the shop that's leading the way, doing the right things? Talk to me a little bit about that culture balance, and really how you develop those people.
Yeah. So, I mean, it comes down to a fundamental question that a lot of my content and my coaching, I always say this: when you're having an issue with a particular employee, like they're just not getting it done, right? They're not doing the right thing. As a leader, you have to take pause. First of all, as a leader, I cannot delegate responsibility. So I cannot hold them technically responsible for their actions, right? Because it's me. I hired them. I'm in charge of them. When something goes wrong in my department, they come and talk to me. I can, however, delegate my authority to them so they can actually move and communicate and do the things they have to do. So we understand that. So when I have a team member that's not getting it done, not acting appropriately, not communicating effectively, not doing the things that they're just supposed to do, I need to take pause and ask myself, fundamentally, are they untrained or are they unwilling? And I have to be very honest with myself, because depending on how I answer this question is going to depend the future of this person in my dealership or in my service department, in my independent shop, wherever we're working. So I have to ask that question. So the first thing I would want to do is try to offer this person some mentorship, some training, because potentially it's my fault because I didn't provide them training. It's my responsibility. I can't delegate that. If I didn't train them, they're not responsible for their actions. I am. So I needed to attempt to fix this, right? Hey, I noticed you're doing XYZ. Why don't you try A, B, and C? This is how I used to do it. Maybe you could try this, and work with them. Do that over a period of time if they're untrained. If you get to a point where you have provided them training, every opportunity, and they're still just not getting it done, of course you're counseling them. Hey, like, this is not looking good for you. Like, what's going on? How can I help? Once you get to the point where you realize that they're just simply unwilling, maybe this just isn't the business for them. Maybe it's not the right time for them. At that point in time, maybe it's time that this person should explore some other opportunities, because if I allow this person to remain who is unwilling to do the job, who has every capacity but is unwilling, that's going to negatively affect the cohesion of everyone else on the team. And if I hang on to this one person because there's a technician shortage and I need to just keep all my technicians, then I'm going to eventually lose all my good eggs, because they're not going to want to work with that person anymore. And it's nothing personal. They're just not willing to do the job right now. And I've exhausted every resource I could possibly do to make sure that they want to do the job and that they can do the job. So as a leader, that's the steps that you have to take. Are they untrained or are they unwilling? Be very honest with yourself and take actions appropriately.
That is I think in every great leader I've ever talked to, been involved with, worked for, they are the ones that did exactly what you just said right there, which is to look in the mirror and say, where did I screw up? And I think the unsuccessful ones are the ones that aren't having as much joy in their business life, are the ones that, and I think this is typical in our industry, that look at that person and say, they're not doing their job, they're out of here. Like they don't, they place the blame. It's very easy to finger point in that scenario. But if you can look back at yourself as a leader and say, okay, where did I miss here? What happened? And in a lot of cases, and I use this example because it was very specific to my family's own shop, where we had a person that was employed by us, a technician who had traditionally been a pretty good tech. And then all of a sudden his performance fell off. It fell off a cliff big time. And my own dad, his reaction was, we got to let this person go like right now. And I said, well, wait a minute. Like, he was good at one point and then fell off. There's got to be something else going on. And so sat down, had a conversation with him, and it came out that he was going through a divorce, and that had a direct impact on his performance. It allowed him to be able to get that off of his chest because he was hiding it. And I think at some level, there's almost some level of embarrassment, and you don't really want everybody to be in your business, just it's your personal life and you try to keep it outside, but at some level it's going to have an impact on you as a person. And in that scenario, stuck with him, worked through it, and he became a great technician again. Right. And it was just that kind of downturn. And I think that's a common mistake with a lot of leaders, is not taking a step back, looking at the situation from more of a macro level, getting very emotional and just getting pissed off, frankly, and then making an aggressive move. When if you just slow down a little bit and kind of get a feel for the person, and that's such a big piece. I think even through your white paper I saw with communication, I think that's some level of the communication they're talking about. Hey, if I'm going through a hard time with my own personal life, I don't want you breathing over my shoulder saying, hey, your productivity sucks right now. Like, why does it suck? And not having a good answer to come back with, or if that technician doesn't feel comfortable being candid with you or giving you personal information, you might not be doing it right. You might not be building that trust to the level that you need to.
It's the classic dichotomy of management versus leadership. A lot of people get it conflated and think it's the same thing. It's not. Managers are all about the numbers. They're about the gross profit, the numbers on the attendance sheet, the amount of people we have working here. If it fits on a spreadsheet with a numerical value, it's something a manager needs to address. Leadership is all about the only thing that can define a leader, which is people. You're a leader when people willingly follow you. Just because you're the director, manager, owner, whatever, does not make you the leader, because I've worked in places where I had a manager, but I went to the dispatcher for everything I needed. He was the leader, not the appointed leader, but we all went to him every time we had a question. We circumvented the manager because he just never had answers, or he would avoid us. He would actually just turn around and walk away when I was speaking to him. So he was not the leader. Appointed, but not. He was the manager. So managers, we need managers. We got to keep track of those numbers and make sure we're on set to hit our metrics and everything, because that's how we keep people employed. But we need leadership when it comes to people. It's a people business. And something as personal as somebody's going through a divorce and that's why their performance is wailing, that's a people issue 100%. You can't put that in a spreadsheet. You can't manage it like a number or anything like that. That takes a leader. The last time I checked, it's 0% indentured servants in the automotive industry. I don't think anybody's being forced to do their jobs. So the thing is when you have a technician like what you had referenced, that's been working for us for several months or even years, and they've done great, and all of a sudden they're not, well, let's take a step back and let's look at this. This person at one point in time put an application in, interviewed, and said, I want to work here. And then they showed up day after day after day after day, which tells me that this person wanted to be here at one point in time. Nobody forced them to come here. You're telling me that all of a sudden they just don't want to be here anymore, that they don't want to work here anymore? What's actually happening here? There's a people issue going on here. This person came here willingly, and now that they just don't want to be here, how did they get here in the first place? So there's always a potentiality to retain those people if we would just communicate with them and say, hey, what's going on? That's really what leadership is all about. It's a people business through and through. You got to train your leadership skills and your managerial skills. You got to be both if you're in that position of leadership, if you're going to succeed.
Want to build a pipeline of young technician talent in your shop? Check out School Assist. Powered by WrenchWay and ASE, School Assist makes it easy for shops and dealerships who are looking for young technician talent to build relationships with instructors and their students. Schools post specific requests for things like equipment, tools, advisory committee members, shop visits, and more. Shops can view these requests and directly connect with program instructors all in one place. Over 2,800 schools and 2,000 shops are already using School Assist to build valuable connections. See if it's right for your shop. Learn more at wrenchway.com/school-assist. Link is in the show notes. I want to ask for your advice from the standpoint of a young technician that's out there, and say, you've got that young tech, they have aspirations to get into management at some point, or aspirations to climb the ladder, if you will. What advice would you give that young technician right now?
It's never a clear cut and dry path. It's never an easy path, but I would just say, don't quit. I was that person. I was very frustrated when I was writing service. I had a lot of ideas. Not all of them were great, but I had ideas. And nobody would listen to me. And we had high turnover. I mean, I was watching 14 people in a year leaving service lanes, just generations of people. When I started the job one time in one particular shop, the first person I checked in said another new person. Like that was my first customer interaction in this dealership. So I mean, I have seen those things, and I've reached out and talked to different managers and stuff like, hey, I think if we did this is what I'm seeing. Maybe we could, I'm having troubles here, and I'm just like speaking, and nobody wanted to listen to me. And it wasn't until I started posting on social media that people started listening to me. And that's sort of what helped me out. It was an outlet for me, and people actually wanted to listen to me there. And to this point, now we have 115,000 subscribers, writing books now and providing ebooks and white papers and doing research. And that's how Rockhead found me. And now I get to help automotive employees every single day. And I'm actually being heard. For example, I'm on podcasts now. That's pretty cool. I appreciate the time. So it's never a clear cut and dry path. I'm not saying that's going to work for any young technician right now, but I am saying that you have to continue to hone yourself, continue to sharpen your skills. Eventually somebody will see value in you. If they're not seeing it right now, they're not the right people to see that value in you. And that's not probably the person you want to be actually providing your value to. So continue to work on those leadership skills, continue to work on yourself, continue to grow yourself as a professional. It's a you journey. It's all about you. You're the only one that can make a difference. And eventually you will be seen or heard by somebody that can actually see value, somebody you actually want to give your efforts to, and it will happen for you. I don't have a timeline available. It's going to be a long road. Just don't give up. Just make sure you keep going every single day. That's all it takes, is that you continue the path, the journey yourself.
That is such great advice in general. And I think my experience was similar to yours, right? You're always at some level impatient as a young person, and you have those big aspirations, and you want to buy the nice stuff, and you want to make the money and all of that stuff. And, I think my one word of caution to a young Chris or a young Jay that's out there is that when you go that route, and it's really easy to fall in that trap of, I need that next promotion, I need that next, whatever it is, you do at some level, you can get promoted to that level of ineptitude. And I feel like in my experience, I was very much that way. I was 30 years old with a team of 140 people, many of which had worked there longer than I'd been alive. And you get to that point and you do feel that imposter syndrome, because maybe you haven't gone through all the proper steps the way that you should have. And looking back over the course of my career, I probably wouldn't change anything except that, like, be a little bit more patient, live a little more frugally if you need to make sure that you're doing the steps the right way, and truly learning the operations of how things work. And it took me some time to learn that lesson, but patience is so key. And you're going to have bad days in whatever job you're in. It doesn't matter what job, there's going to be ups and downs. Sometimes some jobs offer more of a roller coaster than others, but if you can be patient and truly try to, if you're on that lube rack right now, be the best lube tech you can be. Do all the little things right, because those habits that you learn at that level are going to carry out with you throughout the rest of your career. And if you do show up to work on time, if you do communicate and you have that positive attitude, let me tell you something, you are going to stick out like a sore thumb, because not everybody's that way.
I agree. And I would say also don't get wrapped up in seeking the credit. When I was
Mm.
younger, I really wanted a lot of the credit, and I took a journey a couple of years now where I just stopped wanting credit for things. I mean, for example, people take my social media stuff and post it to their websites and say it's their training videos, or they'll pretend to be me. I was actually very upset. It was a Mary Hudson or something, like a female name, that took my content and posted it to Facebook and got a larger following than I had at the time on Facebook with my own content, which I really wasn't posting there anymore. I had kind of given up on that because it was just too much. I can only focus on so many social media channels, but got a decent, like, couple 10,000 followers with my content, and they were taking all the credit. And somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, like, this person's like stealing you right now." And I was like, "Yeah, I should probably say something about that." And I will. I'll put something in there, but I'm not worried about that credit, because at the end of the day, and this is what I told that person that reached out and let me know, my message is still reaching people. Even if that's not me posting it, even if it's somebody that might misrepresent me in the comment section or something. Obviously, my name's not Mary. They know who I am. Um, my message is still reaching additional ears and eyes. And that was good enough for me, even if I'm not getting credit for it. I knew myself that I was making a difference. So if you're on that lube rack, like you had mentioned, and you're changing oil to the best of your ability, and you're doing your multi-point inspections flawlessly, and you're providing really good feedback to your customers, yeah, your advisor might get the handshake and your manager might get the handshake from the owner because everything's going great in the maintenance department, but you know that you're the one that's making that difference. Don't go crazy seeking that credit. One day you will receive the credit, but don't seek it today. Just keep doing your job the way you're supposed to do it. Keep pushing forward. And eventually one day the credit will come to you. It might be a long journey, like I said, a couple of years, but don't seek the credit. You'll go crazy doing that. You'll start to feel like nobody cares about your work, but trust me, they do care. They just don't know it's you yet. They'll find out eventually.
That is brilliant advice. And you always have great advice. As we're talking, I'm sitting here taking notes, and we've had similar experiences. We actually had one not too long ago where there was I think a recruiting company, and this person was speaking at a conference, and I'm like, oh, I'll check him out. It wasn't the conference we were just at, by the way. It was a different conference. And it looked at his website, and they literally stole all of the data that we came up with. And it was like their homepage of their website. And I was in a similar boat, I think, at first, where you're like, well, that kind of stinks. Like, why would somebody do that? And then over time, you're like, it's not worth the battle. Like, whatever. If it helps them out, perfect. But it is one of those things where you get a little taken back at first, and then I think you see maybe the bigger picture. And even the older we get, I think the more we learn and the more we can apply. And maybe that was a lesson from earlier in my career, where you don't get so reactive and just kind of, things happen, right? And
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. Humbleness and gratitude, right? Be grateful that there are people that did this job long before you and are willing to pass the torch and show you the ropes so you can actually do the job, and stay humble no matter where you are in your career, that you always have more to learn. That's what I tell everybody: humbleness and gratitude. You got to hug those tight.
You lead by example with that. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk with you. I'm so happy we got to connect on another podcast again too. I love talking to you, and it's an easy interview, so that makes my job easy. But hope you'll come back on, especially once we get this book out and published. We need to get you back on and talk more in depth about that. You and I could probably talk for days on end, but I think this was just such a fantastic interview, fantastic white paper. The work that you're doing at Rocked is amazing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to come on. It's always a great conversation that we have. Would love to come back on again when the book launches, hopefully around April timeframe. There is a wait list. If anybody's interested, they can hop on the wait list. Just need an email, and you can be the first to know when it hits the shelves.
And how do they find you? If they haven't found you yet, I don't know that they're following any type of industry content, but how do people check out your content and connect with you?
So you just search my name, Chris Craig, or my actual username, Chris_MF_Craig. That's on YouTube and TikTok. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Christopher Craig there, because to get your account verified, you have to use your government name, and that is my government name. So that's how you can find me on all the 3 platforms that I'm most active on.
Yeah, go check them out. It was a pleasure, Chris. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.